All right, class. This video will finish up the lecture with the political doomsday machine, looking at European diplomacy, focusing on the change in Great Britain's policy between 1890 and 1914. So I think the first question is why? Why does Great Britain decide that in 1890 it is time for them to change their approach to foreign policy? Well, there's a couple reasons here. Number one, Great Britain realized that there was a decline in their standing in the world. Specifically, economic power is now matched by Germany. Russia and France had expanded their imperial efforts, and now they're challenging the British Empire. What stayed the same? Even in the face or in the midst of all this change, there could still be some instances of continuity happening or some sense of consistency occurring. So what stayed the same? And this is key, that Great Britain's kept their traditional policy of involving themselves in continental alliances only when it was required as a last resort to prevent an aggressor from overturning the balance of power. And this is going to be something that Germany is not able to fully grasp. They keep on offering Great Britain something that they don't want. So just remember that as we go through this process for the next 24 years. So what's interesting to note here is that Germany had the first opportunity to get Great Britain on their side and messed it up. In 1887, there was a series of Mediterranean agreements in which Great Britain became indirectly associated with the Triple Alliance. But then this key mistake happened. Germany thought that it could drive a hard bargain with an all-or-nothing sort of approach with Great Britain. We want you to be all into the Triple Alliance and be committed militarily or nothing. And once again, you're offering Great Britain something that it doesn't want. So Great Britain backed away. You contrast that with France. France settled for a slow step-by-step approach. France waited 20 years for Russia to come around to get them to agree to the 1894 agreement, and then waited an additional 15 years for Great Britain. This shows that Germany was just too short-sighted and almost amateurish in foreign policy post-Bismarck. Once again, some more examples here of this short-sightedness of Kaiser Wilhelm and Germany as a whole being short-sighted. Cutting out the reinsurance treaty in 1890. This limited Germany's options, by limiting Germany's options and cutting out that agreement with Russia, this promoted Austrian boldness that we will see. We'll see that boldness really come full circle and come to blows in the summer of 1914. By limiting Germany's options and cutting out the reinsurance treaty, and by promoting Austrian boldness, this also increased Russian anxieties. And so Russia's searching out here for some sort of counterweight to Austrian boldness in the Balkans, and France was more than eager to supply that. And so what's the consequence you see of this short-sightedness? 1894, this military alliance is formed between France and Russia, and it's the beginning of this breakdown of balance of power in Europe. To have this balance of power, or the conditions that are needed to maintain this balance of power, three things are needed, which break down here after 1894. Number one, each nation must feel itself free to align with any other state depending on the circumstances. That breaks down now. Number two, fixed alliances are there, but a balancer exists, like the Great Britain situation. That's going to break down. And then alliances, or you have alliances and no balancer, but the cohesion between alliances is so loose and so low that there is room for change and compromise, and that starts to break down. And once again, Kissinger really points to Germany and that Weltpolitik and those short-sighted and almost Bullian tactics that Kaiser Wilhelm and his guys employed for the cause of this breakdown. And the consequence here is that diplomacy now, when the balance of power goes away and diplomacy turns rigid, you see an arms race, which that's what you saw with Germany and Great Britain, and you see increasing tension start to rise. And that's what you see in the Balkans. That's what you see between Russia and Germany, and that's when you see between Germany and Great Britain as well. So back to Germany and Great Britain. So back to Germany and Great Britain. Even in the wake of the Franco-Russian alliance, Germany still refused to give that sort of entente sort of agreement that Great Britain was open to. William II insisted on what he called a continental type alliance, and I quote Wilhelm II. If England wants allies or aid, he said in 1895, she must abandon her non-committal policy and provide continental type agreements, guarantees, and treaties. But once again, like this is a century of near isolation by Great Britain. They're clearly not ready to undertake that sort of permanent continental commitment, especially on the behalf of Germany, which was fast becoming the strongest country on the continent. So once again, right, offering or forcing Great Britain's hand into something that they don't want to accept. Kaiser refuses to acknowledge Great Britain's traditional policy of trying to stay out of commitments on the continent unless it feels like it's its last resort. And by driving these hardline bargains, Germany is going to lead Great Britain to suspect that Germany, in fact, was seeking world domination. Some other bigger problems to consider here is that Germany didn't really need this type of agreement from Great Britain. It just needed Great Britain not to take a side in the Continental War. But you know, by doing this, they drove Great Britain into the arms of the French and the Russians with those fears that Germany was, in fact, seeking world domination. This came up again in 1900. Great Britain, their cabinet said that they wanted nothing more than that Entente-style arrangement, like they would have one in 1904. And this would basically be an understanding with regard to policy, which they might pursue when interests are common in certain parts of the world. So kind of like this agreement or Entente-style arrangement with Germany, when you have an understanding with like colonial possessions or any other policies around the globe. This is what Great Britain wanted in 1900. However, new German Chancellor Bülow refused this because he was worried about public opinion, and he said that he would curtail the naval program for nothing less than British adherence to a triple alliance. The problem here that Bülow doesn't understand is that Great Britain and Germany simply did not have enough parallel interests to justify the formal global alliance that Germany craved. A question here, what else caused Great Britain to move closer to France? The naval program, the harassment of Great Britain during the Boer War. During the Boer War of 1899 to 1902, Germany verbally supported the Boers in their fight against the British, and the Boers actually bought arms from Germany as well. The result of this, you have the 1904 Entente Cordiale, you know, the first step in making Great Britain part of the Triple Entente. And the Morocco crises in 1905 and 1911 just makes these ties stronger. All right, so moving on, some short-term causes here to World War I. Unrest in the Balkans with Austria. Austria is, you know, we want to go back to looking at Austria wanting to stop Serb or Slav nationalism in the area. They want the influence in that area, and they want to do anything to stop Russia from having their influence in the Balkan region. The second thing that we want to take into consideration for short-term crises or causes, excuse me, would be the Bosnian crisis of 1908. Just a short breakdown here to kind of recap. Austria-Hungary had occupied the Bosnia-Herzegovina since 1878. In 1908, Russia and Austria-Hungary agreed to annexation if Russia could get some of the straits from the Black Sea to the Mediterranean Sea. So essentially, this agreement was that Russia said, Austria-Hungary, you can annex Bosnia-Herzegovina if you agree to support us and get in the straits so we have a waterway access from the Black Sea to the Mediterranean Sea. In 1908, Austria-Hungary did their part in annexing Bosnia, but did not support Russia in acquiring those straits. Germany steps in and forces Russia to back down, humiliating Russia, and this will drive Russia closer to Serbia. This will cause Russia to look to Serbia for as a country that they could support, as a country that they could check Austrian interest with, and so you start to see that tie and that alliance grow stronger between the Serbs and the Russians. And then finally, you got the Balkan Wars of 1912 and 1913. The results here of these Balkan Wars, that Austria sees Serbia as a threat and an enemy. You see Russian influence within Serbia or with Serbia, and you see Serb resentment because they didn't get the seaport due to Albania being created, and you see the rise of those nationalist feelings, all right, coming out of that resentment. And those nationalist feelings, that resentment, is really going to be pointed at Austria. Going on here, you might want to pause this and write these down if you want. So why did each country go to war? And I just have listed here the key factors. All right, so this is why Austria went to war with Serbia. If you have any questions about any of these bullet points, this is something that you could ask. All right, why did Russia mobilize? They're the first country to mobilize, so why did they do this? Here's some of the key factors here. Why did Germany support Austria? All right. Why France mobilized, and why Britain ended up declaring war on Germany. All right, so I think to kind of check to see how well you understand this and you understand the concept of causation, if you look at these general causes of war that I have listed here, looking at the evidence for the importance of the cause, all right, what can you point to that could be considered evidence or specific factual information that could be used in support of this being a cause for war? The second thing that you could do is look at the actual causes and rank them based on priority, rank them based on importance here to the outbreak of World War I. You could also look at the specific pieces of evidence that you have in the right-hand side of the column and rank those, right? Where would the Moroccan crisis fall as far as its contribution to the outbreak of war? How important was that? Or how important was Weltpolitik? Or how important was, the Bosnian crisis? Going through and looking at those specific pieces of evidence or the specific events or the specific people, right, and deciding, all right, so how important were they in contributing to the outbreak of war? All right, if you have any questions, let me know. I'll be happy to answer them.